February 19, 2013, Los Angeles, California. In one of the most infamous hotels in America, a young woman stepped into an elevator and was never seen alive again. What security cameras captured in those final moments would spark one of the most debated mysteries in modern true crime history. But the real horror wasn't just how she died. It was where police found her body 3 weeks later, and the disturbing questions that still remain unanswered to this day. This is the case of Elisa Lam, and the elevator footage that haunted millions around the world. To understand what happened to Elisa Lam, it's necessary to understand the place where she spent her final days. The Cecil Hotel, located at 640 South Main Street in downtown Los Angeles, has one of the darkest histories of any building in America. Since opening in 1924, the Cecil Hotel became synonymous with tragedy and violence. Serial killer Richard Ramirez, known as the Night Stalker, stayed there in 1985 while terrorizing Los Angeles. Austrian serial killer Jack Unterweger lived at the Cecil in 1991 while murdering sex workers in the area. At least 16 deaths had occurred at the hotel over the decades, including numerous suicides from people jumping from upper-floor windows. The hotel's reputation became so notorious that in 2011, 2 years before Elisa's arrival, management rebranded part of it as Stay on Main in an attempt to distance themselves from the building's dark past. By 2013, the Cecil Hotel sat in the heart of Skid Row, one of the most impoverished and dangerous areas of downtown Los Angeles. The neighborhood was known for homelessness, drug addiction, and violent crime. The hotel itself had become a place where transient residents lived alongside budget travelers who had booked rooms online without knowing the building's history. The rooms were cheap, often under $50 per night, and the clientele reflected that price point. It was into this environment that a 21-year-old Canadian student named Elisa Lam checked in on January 26, 2013. She was traveling alone, midway through a solo trip along the West Coast that had taken her from San Diego through Los Angeles and was supposed to end in Santa Cruz. Elisa was a student at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, studying at the time of her disappearance. She was bright, creative, and active on social media, maintaining a blog where she wrote about her struggles with mental health, her love of literature, and her traveling experiences. Those who knew Elisa described her as intelligent and thoughtful, someone who thought deeply about the world around her. She had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder and depression, conditions she had been managing with medication and therapy. Her blog posts revealed someone who was introspective and self-aware, openly discussing her mental health challenges while also expressing optimism about her future. She had named her blog Ether Fields, a reference that suggested her interest in the ethereal and philosophical. In her posts, she wrote about her travels, her favorite musicians, and her thoughts on life. There was nothing in her online presence that suggested someone planning to harm themselves or disappear. In fact, she had been regularly checking in with her parents throughout her trip, calling them every day to let them know she was safe and tell them about her adventures. On January 31, 2013, Elisa's daily phone call home never came. Her parents, David and Elisa Lam, immediately knew something was wrong. This wasn't like their daughter. She was responsible and always kept in touch, especially when traveling alone in a foreign country. When they couldn't reach her by phone, they contacted the Los Angeles Police Department to report her missing. The LAPD visited the Cecil Hotel and spoke with staff, but initially, there were no obvious signs of what had happened to Elisa. Her personal belongings were still in her room. Her luggage was there, but Elisa herself had vanished. Hotel staff reported that she had been staying in a shared hostel-style room initially, but had been moved to a private room after roommates complained about her odd behavior, though the specific nature of those complaints varied in different accounts. Detectives began interviewing hotel staff, guests, and anyone who might have seen Elisa in the days before her disappearance. They searched her room thoroughly, looking for any clues about where she might have gone or what might have happened to her. They found her personal items, including her laptop and other belongings, but nothing that immediately explained her disappearance. There were no signs of a struggle in her room, no evidence of forced entry, nothing stolen. It was as if she had simply walked out and never returned. As the investigation continued, police obtained security camera footage from the hotel, hoping to trace Elisa's movements on the day she disappeared. What they found on that footage would become one of the most analyzed and debated pieces of video evidence in true crime history. The elevator surveillance video, time-stamped from January 31st at approximately 4 p.m., showed Elisa entering an elevator on one of the hotel's floors. The footage was grainy, typical of hotel security cameras from that era, shot from a fixed camera position in the upper corner of the elevator. What happened next has been analyzed frame by millions of people around the world. In the video, Elisa enters the elevator and immediately presses multiple floor buttons. She then steps to the side of the elevator, near the button panel, and waits. The elevator doors remain open. She doesn't press any more buttons. After several seconds, she peers out of the elevator, looking down the hallway to her left, as if checking to see if someone is there. She steps slightly out of the elevator, looks both directions down the hallway, then steps back inside. The elevator doors still do not close. Elisa presses more buttons, seemingly frustrated that the elevator isn't moving. She then steps out into the hallway again, standing just outside the elevator doors. She appears to be talking, though there is no audio on the surveillance footage. Her hand gestures suggest she might be having a conversation with someone, but no other person is visible in the frame. She moves her hands in animated ways, talking to someone or something that the camera cannot see. After about 30 seconds of this behavior, she steps back into the elevator and positions herself in the corner, where she cannot be seen from the hallway. She stands pressed against the side wall as if hiding. Several more seconds pass. Nothing happens. The elevator doors remain open the entire time. Then Elisa steps out of the elevator one final time. She makes more animated hand gestures, her movements appearing increasingly agitated or distressed. She waves her hands around in unusual patterns, bringing them up near her head and making gestures that are difficult to interpret. Some observers have described her movements as playful, others as confused, still others as frightened. The ambiguity of the footage is part of what has made it so endlessly debatable. After roughly 2.5 minutes of this behavior, Elisa walks away from the elevator and out of frame. The elevator doors finally close, and the elevator begins moving, presumably going to one of the many floors she had pressed buttons for earlier. That was the last confirmed sighting of Elisa Lam alive. When the LAPD released this elevator footage to the public on February 13th, 2 weeks after Elisa's disappearance, it went viral almost immediately. The video was uploaded to YouTube and viewed millions of times within days. The internet became obsessed with trying to explain Elisa's behavior in the elevator. Theories ranged from the rational to the supernatural. Some people believed she was playing a game, possibly the elevator game, an urban legend popular in Asian cultures where people attempt to access another dimension by pressing elevator buttons in a specific sequence. Others thought she was under the influence of drugs, though there was no evidence to support this theory. Mental health professionals who viewed the footage suggested she might have been experiencing a manic episode or psychotic break, consistent with someone who had stopped taking medication for bipolar disorder. More sensational theories emerged as well. Some claimed she was being chased by someone the camera couldn't capture. Others insisted the hotel was haunted and that Elisa had encountered a ghost or demon. Conspiracy theorists pointed to every detail of the video as evidence of something sinister, analyzing the timestamp, the length of the video, the way the elevator doors behaved, and Elisa's every movement for hidden meaning. The case became an internet phenomenon, with amateur detectives around the world trying to solve the mystery of what happened to Elisa Lam. But while the internet speculated, the Los Angeles Police Department continued their investigation using more conventional methods. They searched the hotel top to bottom. They interviewed hundreds of people. They followed up on reported sightings and tips. They brought in cadaver dogs to search the building, but for weeks there was no sign of Elisa. Then, on February 19, 2013, exactly 3 weeks after Elisa's parents reported her missing, hotel maintenance workers at the Cecil made a horrifying discovery. Guests had been complaining for days about problems with the water in the hotel. The water pressure was low. The water coming from the taps had an odd color and strange taste. Some guests reported that the water smelled unusual. These complaints had been increasing, and hotel management finally sent maintenance workers up to the roof to check the water tanks. The Cecil Hotel, like many older buildings in Los Angeles, stored water in large cisterns on the roof. These tanks supplied water to the entire building, and any problem with them would affect every room in the hotel. When maintenance workers climbed the ladder to inspect the tanks, they found that one of the tank access hatches was open. The tanks were large, rectangular containers, approximately 4 feet by 8 feet at the opening and 10 feet deep. When the worker looked inside the tank with the open hatch, he saw something floating in the water. It was Elisa Lam's body. She was found naked, floating face up in the water. Her clothes and personal belongings were found at the bottom of the same tank. The discovery was immediately reported to the LAPD, and the scene was processed as a potential crime scene. The question that everyone was asking was both simple and horrifying. How did Elisa Lam end up inside a water tank on the roof of the Cecil Hotel? Accessing the roof of the Cecil Hotel was not simple. The roof was secured and not accessible to guests under normal circumstances. To reach it, someone would need to either take the elevator or stairs to the 15th floor, the top floor of the guest room section, then find access to a locked door leading to an area that would take them higher. From there, they would need to climb a ladder to reach the roof itself. Once on the roof, the water tanks were positioned in a way that would require additional climbing to access them. The tank that Elisa was found in had a hatch opening, but that hatch was heavy and would require significant force to open. The opening itself was relatively small, making it difficult but not impossible for a person to climb inside. But why would anyone, especially someone who appeared distressed as Elisa did in the elevator video, go to such lengths to access a water tank on the roof? The Los Angeles County Coroner's Office began the process of determining how Elisa died. An autopsy was performed and toxicology tests were conducted to check for drugs, alcohol, or other substances in her system. The initial autopsy results were inconclusive regarding the cause of death. There were no signs of physical trauma that would suggest she had been attacked or murdered. There were no defensive wounds, no signs that she had been sexually assaulted. The toxicology report, when it was finally completed months later, showed that Elisa had several medications in her system, but not at therapeutic levels. Specifically, the report showed low levels of medications prescribed for bipolar disorder, suggesting that she had not been taking her medication as prescribed in the days or weeks before her death. This finding was significant because it suggested that Elisa might have been experiencing symptoms of her mental illness without the benefit of medication to manage those symptoms. The coroner ultimately ruled Elisa's death as an accidental drowning, with her bipolar disorder listed as a significant contributing factor. The official finding was that Elisa had likely climbed into the water tank on her own and was unable to get back out, eventually drowning. The coroner noted that her behavior in the elevator video was consistent with someone experiencing a manic episode or psychotic break, which can occur when someone with bipolar disorder is not taking their medication. However, this official ruling did little to satisfy the millions of people who had become invested in the case. For many, the explanation raised more questions than it answered. How did Elisa access the locked roof? Even if she managed to get to the roof, how did she open the heavy hatch on the water tank? Why would someone experiencing a mental health crisis specifically seek out a water tank to climb into? And perhaps most disturbingly, why would she remove her clothing? These questions led many people to reject the official explanation and continue pursuing alternative theories. Some pointed out that the roof access should have been secured and that the hotel had a responsibility to ensure guests couldn't reach dangerous areas like the roof. Others noted that even if Elisa had been experiencing a mental health crisis, the specific sequence of events required for her to end up in the water tank seemed implausible. Investigators and hotel staff eventually explained that while the roof access was supposed to be locked, security at the Cecil Hotel was notoriously lax. The building was old, doors were often propped open, and locks were sometimes broken or not properly engaged. It was possible, even likely, that someone determined to reach the roof could have done so, especially during overnight hours when fewer staff members were present. As for the water tank hatch, while it was heavy, it was not impossible for a person to open it, especially if they were determined or in an altered mental state, where they might not be registering physical discomfort or difficulty. The question of why someone would climb into a water tank remained the most difficult to explain, but mental health professionals noted that people experiencing severe manic episodes or psychotic breaks can engage in behavior that seems inexplicable to outside observers but makes sense within the distorted reality they're experiencing at that moment. The removal of clothing, while disturbing, is also not uncommon in cases of paradoxical undressing, a phenomenon where people experiencing hypothermia or extreme psychological distress remove their clothing. Though the water in the tank would not have been cold enough to cause hypothermia, the psychological distress Elisa may have been experiencing could have led to similar behavior. The hotel itself faced immediate consequences following the discovery of Elisa's body. Guests who had been staying at the Cecil during the weeks when Elisa's body was in the water tank were horrified to realize they had been drinking, bathing in, and brushing their teeth with water that had been contaminated by a decomposing corpse. Some guests reported becoming ill, though it was never definitively established whether their illnesses were related to the water quality or were psychosomatic reactions to learning about the contamination. The hotel faced potential lawsuits from guests and damage to its already troubled reputation. Public health officials tested the water and declared it safe after the tank was drained and cleaned, but the psychological damage was done. The image of Elisa Lam's body floating in the hotel's water supply became inextricably linked with the Cecil Hotel's already dark legacy. The Lam family released a statement through their attorney, expressing their grief and asking for privacy. They noted that Elisa had a history of bipolar disorder and had been doing well managing her condition with medication and support from her family. They expressed confusion about why she had stopped taking her medication during her trip, something that her blog posts and communications with friends hadn't clearly explained. The family also expressed frustration with the internet speculation surrounding their daughter's death, particularly the more outlandish conspiracy theories that treated Elisa's tragedy as entertainment rather than a real family's devastating loss. In the years since Elisa's death, her family has largely stayed out of the public eye, though they have occasionally spoken out against the conspiracy theories and asked people to remember Elisa as a real person who struggled with mental illness, not as a character in an unsolved mystery. The case has continued to generate interest and speculation years after Elisa's death. In 2021, Netflix released a documentary series called Crime Scene: The Vanishing at the Cecil Hotel, which examined Elisa's case alongside the hotel's broader history of tragedy and violence. The series interviewed many of the people involved in the investigation, including LAPD detectives, the hotel manager, and internet sleuths who had become obsessed with solving the case. The documentary drew criticism from some quarters for potentially glamorizing conspiracy theories and giving platforms to web sleuths whose investigations had sometimes veered into harassment of innocent people. One man who had been staying at the Cecil at the time of Elisa's disappearance was targeted by internet detectives who became convinced he was involved in her death, despite having no evidence to support this theory. He was harassed online, and his life was significantly impacted by these baseless accusations, highlighting the dark side of internet detective work. The documentary also featured mental health professionals who explained bipolar disorder and how people experiencing manic episodes or psychotic breaks can behave in ways that seem bizarre or inexplicable to observers. These experts emphasized that Elisa's behavior in the elevator video, while unusual, was entirely consistent with someone experiencing an untreated mental health crisis. They pointed out that the tragedy of Elisa's case was not some mysterious, unsolvable crime, but rather a young woman who was struggling with a serious mental illness, and who, for reasons we may never fully understand, stopped taking the medication that helped her manage that illness. Without that medication, she likely experienced symptoms that led to impaired judgment and behavior that ultimately resulted in her death. The Cecil Hotel itself has undergone changes since Elisa's death. The building has gone through periods of closure and renovation, with various plans proposed for converting it to affordable housing or other purposes. As of recent years, the hotel has been closed to the public, and its future remains uncertain, but the building's notorious reputation persists, cemented in part by Elisa Lam's case and the viral elevator video that millions of people have watched, analyzed, and theorized about. The case has become a touchstone in true crime culture, referenced in countless videos, podcasts, and articles. It represents the intersection of mental health, internet culture, and society's endless fascination with mysterious deaths. What makes the Elisa Lam case particularly complex is that the official explanation is almost certainly correct, yet it remains unsatisfying to many people. The evidence strongly suggests that Elisa, experiencing an untreated mental health crisis, accessed the hotel roof through inadequately secured doors, climbed onto the water tank platform, opened the hatch, and entered the tank, where she subsequently drowned. Her behavior in the elevator video, while disturbing to watch, is consistent with someone experiencing a manic or psychotic episode. The toxicology evidence showing low levels of her prescribed medications supports the theory that she had stopped taking her medication, which would have left her vulnerable to experiencing symptoms of her bipolar disorder. There is no credible evidence of foul play, no unidentified suspects, no mysterious conspiracy. Yet the case continues to generate speculation because the explanation, while supported by evidence, still feels incomplete in some way. This is partly because mental illness remains poorly understood by much of the general public. People want clear, logical explanations for behavior, and mental health crises don't always provide those neat narratives. The idea that someone could behave so strangely, access such a difficult location, and make choices that led to their own death, all because of an untreated mental health condition, is difficult for people to accept. It's easier, in some ways, to believe in a conspiracy or a crime than to accept the randomness and tragedy of mental illness. But the reality is that bipolar disorder, particularly when untreated, can lead to catastrophic outcomes. People experiencing manic episodes can have severely impaired judgment, can engage in risky behaviors they would never consider when stable, and can have distorted perceptions of reality that lead them to make choices that endanger themselves. The other reason the case remains so compelling is the elevator video itself. Watching Elisa's final recorded moments, seeing her behave in ways that are so clearly distressed and unusual, creates a powerful emotional response in viewers. We see someone who is clearly struggling, who appears to be frightened or confused, and our natural instinct is to want to help or to understand what was threatening her. The fact that the video ends with her walking away, and that we know she died shortly after, creates a narrative tension that feels unresolved. We want there to be more to the story, some explanation that makes her death meaningful or purposeful, rather than simply tragic and preventable. But sometimes the truth is just sad rather than mysterious. And Elisa Lam's case is ultimately a tragedy about a young woman who struggled with mental illness and who died because she couldn't access the treatment and support she needed at a critical moment. The case also raises important questions about hotel security and responsibility for guest safety. The fact that a guest was able to access the roof of the Cecil Hotel and reach the water tanks suggests serious lapses in security protocols. While hotels cannot completely prevent determined individuals from accessing restricted areas, particularly older buildings with aging infrastructure, there are reasonable security measures that should be in place to protect both guests and the hotel itself from liability. The Cecil Hotel's history of deaths and dangerous incidents suggests that security and safety were not adequately prioritized, creating an environment where tragedies like Elisa's death became more likely. In the years since her death, hotel safety protocols have been discussed more widely in the hospitality industry, though it's unclear whether Elisa's case directly led to meaningful changes in industry standards. For Elisa Lam's family, the case will never be closed. They lost their daughter in a foreign country under circumstances that were traumatic and that became the subject of endless public speculation. They have had to watch as their daughter's final moments were analyzed and debated by millions of strangers on the internet. They have had to deal with conspiracy theorists who refuse to accept the official explanation and who continue to promote alternative theories that range from the improbable to the offensive. And they have had to grieve while their daughter's death has been treated by many as an entertaining mystery rather than a personal tragedy. In statements and through their attorney, the Lam family has asked that people remember Elisa as a person, a daughter, a student with hopes and dreams, not as the girl in the elevator video. 10 years have passed since Elisa Lam's body was found in that water tank on the roof of the Cecil Hotel. 10 years since the elevator video went viral and sparked countless theories and debates. The official cause of death remains accidental drowning with bipolar disorder as a significant contributing factor. The LAPD closed the case years ago, satisfied that there was no evidence of foul play. The medical examiner's findings have never been officially challenged or revised. Yet the case continues to fascinate people around the world, continues to generate new videos and articles and discussions. The elevator footage continues to be watched and analyzed, with each new viewer bringing their own interpretations and theories. What happened to Elisa Lam was ultimately a tragedy rooted in mental illness, inadequate security, and a series of circumstances that led to a preventable death. She was a young woman struggling with a serious mental health condition, traveling alone in an unfamiliar city, staying in a hotel with a dangerous infrastructure and lax security during a period when she was not taking her prescribed medication. Any one of those factors might have been manageable, but together they created a perfect storm that led to her death. There was no conspiracy, no supernatural force, no mysterious attacker. There was just a young woman who needed help and who, tragically, didn't get it in time. The real horror of Elisa Lam's case isn't a mystery to be solved. It's the simple, sad reality that mental illness can be deadly, that young people traveling alone are vulnerable, and that sometimes tragedies happen not because of evil intentions, but because of systemic failures to protect people who need protection. If this case made you think about the importance of mental health awareness and the vulnerability of young people traveling alone, hit that like button and subscribe to Classified Crimes. Because here, we don't sensationalize tragedy or promote baseless conspiracy theories. We examine the evidence, respect the victims, and remember that behind every case is a real person and a real family dealing with unimaginable loss. The truth is always more important than the mystery.